Thing
There
number
we go.
four, as we mentioned, talking about indexes, once again, the CPI, Consumer Price Index, comes in light.
Yeah, so this was the opposite of the PPI. The PPI came in above expectations. The CPI, which stands for Consumer Price Index, came in a little bit lower than expected. Now, for people who are, not sure which ones, which metrics we're looking at, when people talk about inflation and they say inflation was up 3% or 2% or 5%, they're typically talking about the CPI. Now, over the last few years, Deep Knowledge Investing has taken the CPI apart and explained why it's inaccurate in a lot of ways, how it's manipulated. I don't think it's really a good measure of inflation, but when people talk about inflation, this is the metric they're talking about. So the April CPI, Consumer Price Index, came in at 3.4%. That was in line with expectations and below last month's 3.5%. The core number, which again excludes food and energy, was 3.6%. That's a little bit below last month and also consistent with expectations. The issue with this stuff is 3.5%. The monthly change was 0.3%. That annualizes to 3.7%. Again, the Fed's aiming for 2%. They're not getting there. There were also other issues with the report. Food at home was up 1.1%. I continue to insist that anybody who thinks food inflation is only 1% hasn't been in a supermarket. If you're listening to this, put it in the comments. How much do you think your grocery bill is up in the last year? If your grocery bill is only up 1% or less, I definitely want to hear from you. You would be the first person to tell me that. Car prices have continued to decline from the insane COVID levels. Energy prices have started to tick up a little bit from last year's reduction. But the big thing that's hard for the Fed is we've got sticky services prices, and that's a huge problem. That's up 5.3%. A lot of that is wages. And so, people are going to their employer saying, hey, wait a minute, my expenses are up, my rent is up, my food is up more than 1%. My car payments are up, you got to pay me more. And it's costing more to keep employees. And I understand, why people want raises. They're not unreasonable, but the issue is we've got a wage price spiral right now where people are understandably and reasonably insisting on higher wages. But then the issue is we end up with services prices up 5%, 5.5%, and that makes it hard to get inflation down.
So I'm going to go the opposite direction now with this question, Gary. Is there a chance that Powell follows Burns in the 70s and then he actually reduces rates too early before inflation cools, or do you see that happening on his watch?
I think I think they're looking at it. Powell and the rest of the Fed, they have talked openly about wanting to cut rates later this year. He's been careful. He said, we'll be data driven. He hasn't made any promises. But I do think that that Powell is somebody who is very aware of history and very aware of how he'll be thought of by future historians. I really think he does not want to go down as the second coming of Arthur Burns. I think he's really worried about letting up on the Fed funds rate too early. And in doing so, if there's another round of inflation, and I think there will be, if that happens, he's going to be looking horrible. He will have made the same mistake that has been made before in his lifetime. And there's a special place in financial hell for people who make the same errors that have been made before. He knows better. So I think they're looking at it, but I don't think that he's going to do it. And then I come back to the point that we made before, which is, take a look at what's going on. Bitcoin hit 70,000 today. Gold
Mm-hmm.
has hit all-time highs. It's closing in on 2,500 right now. Silver back above 30 for the first time in years. Higher overall commodity prices, higher agricultural prices. All of this is telling me that the entire world is expecting more inflation. That's my view. If you have an alternate opinion, again, put it in the comments. If you think this huge increase in commodity prices is something else, I'd love to hear it. But my view is Powell's looking at this and he has to know that they do not have inflation under control yet. He'll talk, but I don't think they're going to lower rates anytime soon.